Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. I'm your host, Alec. My pronouns are he, him. This is episode 80, and I'm super excited for this one because my guest today I've been a huge fan of for a really long time. It's Tomer. How are you doing today, Tomer?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Alec. I'm really excited to talk about magic stuff.
Yes, yeah, I'm a little nervous, not gonna lie. I've been reading your articles and watching Commander Clash and just reading all of your stuff on MTG Goldfish for many years now. I feel like your budget decks, which is kind of the thing you're known for, is really good budget decks. They were what carried me through being able to play Commander in college when I didn't have enough money to pay for a Soul Ring at the time. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, budget commander stuff is kind of like my point of pride. I really like making budget brews, and I appreciate hearing that it actually helps people out, because when I was also in college and I didn't have a lot of money, that's kind of how I played Commander as well. Like, I just built like a $20 pile with like draft chaff and stuff like that. So
yes,
I'm glad it helps people out.
Yeah, it definitely does. I was thinking about it this morning. I've gone through this kind of like arc where back then I was definitely building super budget, kind of as cheap as I could go. And then after I graduated and kind of got a job, I was like, oh wow, I can afford to get, $5 cards now. Like we can get up there. And I started building more expensive decks. And then now that I'm at like 20-ish Commander decks at this point. Built in paper, I'm kind of back to like, I really don't want to buy like a 6th Shockland for this deck, a 6th copy of whatever Shockland this is.
Yeah.
So I've come full circle back around to budget again, which, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a funny journey that it's always relevant to know how to build on a budget.
Yeah, I'm much the same with my own paper decks. Like, I have about 3 decks that I bling out and everything because they're my babies that I've had for many, many years. But then whenever I want to build a new paper deck, I always be like, all right, I'm going to use whatever I have, and then I'll add, like, I'll put a budget on myself of like $20. I'll have whatever cards that I have laying around, and I'll add $20 worth of it, and I'll see what it is. And if they become my babies over many years, then maybe I'll bling them out as well. But that's like a really easy way to approach building new decks. Like, you don't have to commit that much at the beginning and see if you actually really, really like it. And then if you want to bling it out, you can always bling it out later.
Yeah, it's true. I think it just makes so much sense to at least play a few games with the bare bones version of the deck to see if you really like it, and then kind of move up from there. I definitely, for a while, I would spend a little too much money and then realize that I maybe wasn't the biggest fan of the play style or the way the commander worked or something like that, and end up taking it apart. So it just makes more sense to do it that way. And so I mean, I did kind of like a little brief intro to the content you do, but could you just introduce yourself and maybe some of the things I missed?
Sure. Well, my name is Tomer, pronouns he, him. I've been writing about Magic the Gathering for over a decade now, which is a little bit weird to say.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I started writing about Pauper, and then when Commander came out, I switched almost exclusively to Commander content, and I focused primarily on budget Commander stuff when I was doing deck techs and whatnot. But it has evolved to basically me running my own YouTube channel, MTG Goldfish Commander. I'm a full-time employee of MTG Goldfish. I run their Commander channel exclusively, and every single week I have a podcast, Commander Clash podcast, and Commander Clash, which is a gameplay series. It goes up every single week, and sprinkled in between those 2 videos are shorts and deck techs and daily spoiler videos or preview videos as they're coming out, or whatever else I feel like making a video about. So that's basically my 9 to 5. And I'm just, I don't know, really, really excited about Commander at all times, basically. So having a blast.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really fun that you've been doing it for this long. And I do think if anyone out there, if you haven't watched the Commander Clash gameplay, it's when I did a shout out for MTG Goldfish. I can't remember which episode it was. At some point, I did a community spotlight on you, and one of the things I liked is that you play your gameplay on Magic Online, which is pretty unique, but it adds kind of a lot of functionality that like tabletop games don't have. Like every single week, each of you can build a totally new deck, and it's like your restrictions and things like that you work with are just, I think they're easier to set up on MTGO. So yeah, I've really enjoyed that series, and if anyone out there is like building a commander deck, there's probably a Commander Clash episode that includes that commander at some point. Yeah, so definitely go check that out if you haven't already. It's one of my favorites. I always watch the new episodes as they come out.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the entire premise of the show is basically building a new deck every single week, and Magic Online is honestly the only way you could do that, because unless you're like Commander Versus and you can have whatever cards you want at any given time, Magic Online is just an easy way to just like pick up whatever the cards we want for free at any given time. And also, I am shilling a little bit for Magic Online because it does get a bad rap because, you know, the interface is ancient. It's older than most Magic players, I guess. But it is a great way to play Commander because you can essentially build fully functional Commander decks for a fraction of the cost online. And there's actually a bunch of different services, a bunch of different vendors online that give you a free loan account. So the one that we use is Card Hoarder. It's sponsored by us, but there's a couple other vendors as well that do the same thing, where they're going to give you a loan balance of, say, 5 tickets, which is the online currency, and cards that are, you know, $10 or even reserveless cards that are like $500. They can be found online for like 0.01 tickets. So you can build fully functional Commander decks online and give them a whirl for free, as long as you have your own Magic Online account. And it not only is it a great way to just, you know, try out a variety of decks, but it's also a great way to playtest decks too. You'd be like, oh, I really wanted to try out this Volrath deck. Well, you can try it out for free on Magic Online. You know, you could give it a shot and be like, oh, actually, I don't really like this Volrath deck too much. I'm not gonna. So it saves you some money that way. Or if you just want to just try out some different things, Magic Online is really good for that. But that's kind of off topic.
Yeah,
I just like Magic Online.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think it gets maybe a little more hate than it deserves just based on the looks. But truly, as a budget player, if you can get your play group on board as well, it's such a great way to build lots of different decks. And the interface, it functions. You can like Magic Arena might be really pretty, but it doesn't even have multiplayer or Commander. So yeah, Magic Online is a fantastic option. I totally agree.
One day we'll get a Magic Arena Commander thing and all will be well in the world, but for now, Magic Online's there. Wizards doesn't want you to play it, but Magic Online is there.
But it's there. Yeah, for a while in 2020, my playgroup switched to Cockatrice, which it kind of works. It definitely works, but you have to know all the rules and pay attention to everything yourself. And it doesn't actually like progress through the phases of the game and actually like enforce the rules upon you like Magic Online does, which I noticed definitely was needed sometimes playing on formats like Cockatrice. But
if you can stomach Cockatrice's interface, then Magic Online will be a breath of fresh air because it's marginally nicer looking.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah,
and all the rules are automated for you.
Yeah, I love it. Definitely. I feel like Magic Online is great, and it's also easy to watch. Like I like watching the gameplay. It's nice to see like what's in your hand for kind of whoever's playing and recording the game. And I enjoy it a lot. I also like your podcast. Not to get too deep into it, but just the kind of topics you pick, pretty hot topics usually. Like I think the last episode I watched was about the color blue and ways to maybe make it feel less salty, which I really enjoyed that episode. So yeah, things like that I think are really nice to talk about, and I like your podcast that gets into them.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like our podcast is even more popular than our gameplay, which kind of blew me away when we started doing it, because it's relatively, it's a year old now, so it's relatively recent compared to Commander Clash. But yeah, I'm glad the reception was so good, because we were not expecting the numbers we were getting at on the onset. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear that. Okay. Oh, I almost missed it, but let's do our community spotlight for this episode. That's where we take a moment to shout out another content creator in the community that we've been enjoying. And I let the guest do a community spotlight if they want to. And Tomer wanted to do one on Quintessential Commander, which I love. I've talked about them before, and I am happy to talk about them again, because I do think their channel is so good, like it's so well done, and the quality is so high that they definitely deserve to be talked about again. But yeah, Tomer, would you like to give a little shout out to them?
Yeah, so in terms of other Commander channels that I end up watching, I like watching Game Nights, I like watching MTG Mudsta. They're on the higher end of viewership and everything though. One channel though that I feel deserves like at least double, triple, quadruple the reviews that they're getting right now is Quintessential Commander. It's Commander gameplay series. There's usually like 3 people who show up fairly regularly, and then 1 fourth person who kind of rotates out in between. Just a great bunch of people, really good vibes. They're usually showcasing, sometimes they're showcasing like the newest set of commanders, but then they also have their old favorites that they're bringing back from time to time. So good variety, and also the editing is really, really good. If you like the higher end level of editing, like in Game Nights, this is not quite Game Nights level, but it's definitely head and shoulders above most other Commander channels. And the fact that they're doing it with a much smaller team, and they're doing it almost like weekly now. I think they're trying to go for like weekly or 2. That it's a crazy pace, and it shows how much quality is seeping out. So shout out to them. I think they're doing a great job.
Yes, I totally agree. And if I remember correctly, I think they're on it's like Games Haven is the YouTube channel, and then Quintessential Commander is the like playlist or series of videos on that channel. So either way, I'll have a link to that down in the episode description below, or the video description if you're on YouTube. So definitely check it out. Oh, and also all of Tomer's links that we just talked about a little while ago will be there too, and you should definitely check those out. But I think it's time we get into the Commander deck interview that we're doing today, which I'm super excited for, because I remember reading your, I bet it was probably your first article on this deck a long time ago, when you first had the idea for this, and I thought it was such a clever idea for a Commander deck, and I'd never thought about anything like this before. And yeah, I just remember reading about it and thinking it was really cool, and I'm excited to talk about how it's progressed, and I love to see that you're still playing it to this day. And I know it's made at least a couple appearances on Commander Clash, is that right?
Yeah, it's my favorite deck. It's my tribal deck.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, yeah, let's kick things off. So my first question is, who is your commander for this deck, and what inspired you to build it in the first place?
So my current commander is the Ur-Dragon. It's a 5-color Wooburg commander, 9-drop, and it has a powerful Eminence ability that makes dragon spells cost 1 less to cast. And also, when it's on the battlefield, whenever one or more dragons you control attack, you draw that many cards, and you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is picked basically for 2 reasons. First, it enables 5-color, and I want to have a 5-color changeling tribal commander, so I can have all the options. And secondly, the Eminence ability is really powerful, because changelings are kind of like just a smidge overcosted, I would say. Like
Yeah.
paying 2 mana for a 1/1 changeling is not super exciting, but when you're paying 1 mana for a 1/1 changeling, they become actually pretty cool, and it enables a lot of the much needed speed for this deck to kind of start functioning and doing really cool things. And what inspired it was I really loved the idea of Morph on the Boundless when it was first previewed, I think 3.5 years ago now, or three or so years ago now. And I built a Devoid tribal deck around Morphon first, a 5-color colorless deck. And then I was like, well, it is a changeling. Why don't I just try making a changeling tribal deck? And I loved that so much that I built a paper version of it. And then over the years, I slowly moved it towards the Ur-Dragon and just kept, tuning it and everything over time.
The reason I love it so much is it's just such a clever idea to have like this base of creatures that are changelings, so they're all creature types, and then whatever kind of like other synergies you want to include in there, you can, which is really cool because Magic since the beginning has had like creatures that care about other creatures of their same type, and so there are hundreds of different effects to choose from that can like affect your whole board when they're all changelings. So yeah, I think it's really cool just as a concept. I love it.
Yeah, and the thing about Magic also is that there's so many tribes out there. There's obviously the really popular ones like Zombie Tribal or Ninja Tribal or stuff like that. But there's a lot of like weird underdeveloped tribes that don't really have a home, and it's kind of a shame because maybe in like a 60 card deck you could have 4 copies of your tribal payoff card, and it can function. But in 99 card singleton, having like 1 or 2 Griffin tribal cards is not really that interesting to build an entire deck around. So the deck can really take advantage of these one-off tribal stuff. Like, for example, there's Night Exemplar, which gives other night creatures you control +1/+1 and indestructible. And Night Tribal, for a long time at least, didn't really have that much payoff. Like Eldraine had a little bit. But yeah, I get to run that here, and it's very good. Or
Yeah.
Griffin Canyon gets to untap Griffin and give it +1/+1 until end of turn. Griffins, again, don't really have that much support in Commander, but the card is very good, and now I can jam it here as well because, my changelings are every single type at any given time. So any weird, obscure tribal support card can find a home in Tribal.
It's really fun just to scroll through this deck list because with no context, it would make no sense. Like you've got ancient, even just the lands. Ancient Amphitheater is a hilarious card that comes in untapped if you reveal a giant in your hand. I love to see Swarm Yard. That's a favorite of mine, and in the same deck as Ancient Amphitheater. I don't know. Yeah, it's just scrolling through the deck is so fun because, just like you said, all these obscure like payoff cards for these creature types that are maybe don't get as much love. Yeah, it's really cool. I love to see it, and yeah, I'm excited to get into it. So you mentioned that, and I remember that Morophon was the original commander when you first kind of wrote the article about this deck. What has changed since then, and what else has the deck gone through in the last 3 years?
Well, the heart of the deck kind of remains the same. Morophon used to be the commander just because, it's a changeling itself, so thematically it fits the most. However, I did find that the deck is kind of slow. The changelings are a little bit overcosted. So I ended up switching to the Ur-Dragon, and it worked just way better. And Morophon's still one of the best cards in the deck, but it just works a lot better in the 99. From my own experience. But the goal of the deck remains the same. I built a lot of different variations of tribal because you could literally just pick any type of style of tribal you want. You could focus on like combat, you can focus on tapping and untapping, you can focus on sacrifice, life gain, whatever, because it's literally any tribe. So whatever any tribes are good at, you can make that your focus. But my favorite has always been the combat-focused version of it. I just gravitate towards combat in Commander, I guess. And so the meat and potatoes of this deck is basically play a bunch of changelings, play a bunch of tribal lords that focus on attacking and attack until your opponents are dead. So not much change in terms of that. It's just as we keep getting more and more cards, there's more and more tribal synergies that I get to add in. And, I tweak and tune to make it a little bit more powerful, more explosive over time.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It's just I love to see Tovolar and Yuriko and these creatures that are huge in their like specific creature type they're normally in for doing combat stuff, and then putting them in with all these changelings so that they can still do the thing, and it seems really cool. I also have to shout out Liliana's Contract, a favorite of mine. I'm a big fan of demons, so love the idea of having like 4 of these weird looking little changeling like shapeshifter things posing as demons for that. I've won a game off that before where if you have 4 more on your upkeep, 4 more demons of different names on your upkeep, you win the game. I pulled that off one time and it felt really good. I love that card. It's so funny. So for the Ur-Dragon, how often do you actually cast it? It seems like mainly you can kind of just leave it in the command zone, but do you ever actually need to cast it and have a 10/10 out on the field?
I would say maybe half the games I actually end up casting the Ur-Dragon because it is really expensive. It's 9 mana. So most often, I would say like most games will actually have the Ur-Dragon making a short appearance, and that's mostly because I have what's it called, Hellkite Courser, which is a 6 mana dragon. It costs 5 with Ur-Dragon, and it lets you put the Ur-Dragon onto the battlefield and give it haste, and then at the end of turn you put it back into the command zone. So generally speaking, I'll get like the Courser out, get Ur-Dragon on for the big beats, hit somebody for 10, but then I also get to draw a bunch of cards, and I also get to put a permanent on the battlefield, so that's worth it. And then outside of that, 9 mana is a lot. So I really need like one of my mana dorks that can generate a ton of mana. Like I have Heron Blade Elite and Heribaz Druid and Catilda and Gemhide Sliver, and there's a few. There's a few that can generate a lot of mana. And if I get those on the battlefield and a bunch of changelings, then I can get the Ur-Dragon out. But that's like half the games. Like that's if I'm in a really good position, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's more than I expected, but it totally makes sense with Hellkite Courser, and also just the Ur-Dragon having a really cool attacking related effect. I think that makes a lot of sense to have it as this kind of top end for everything else going on.
Yeah, it's the fact that it's the Eminence, you get it all the time though, really makes the deck tick. Like you never have to cast Ur-Dragon, you will always just be casting basically all your changelings for 1 less, and that makes all the difference. It means like you can be aggressive and curve out really well.
Nice. The deck. Yeah. Cool. And so one thing I noticed, I remember this deck you first built it before Kaldheim, and so I'm betting Kaldheim had some pretty significant changes to it, just because it was kind of the first time in a long time we had seen changelings, new changeling cards. So is that the case? Is there anything notable from Kaldheim that you added at that time?
Yeah, there was a couple really good pickups. I like the changelings that are on the lower end, like things that I can play for 1 or 2 mana, like Mass Vandal's really, really good. It basically play for 1 mana, and then you can exile a creature when it enters the battlefield to exile an artifact or enchantment. But like the 2 biggest ones, I would say, the World Tree is really nice because it just adds a lot of easy fixing for the land base. But the biggest one has to be Masquid Nexus. Masquid Nexus, 4 mana artifact. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And you can pay 3 and tap it to create a 2/2 shapeshifter. I've never activated its ability. It's just the fact that it's a 4 mana. All your creatures are all creature types anywhere they are in the game. Allows for really crazy shenanigans because it turns all your tribal support cards, which are generally just not changelings or just some other thing, you make them all into changelings, so they all benefit from each other, and that allows you to just go crazy and win the game essentially. So yeah, that's the best pickup for sure is the Mask with Nexus. But there's a lot of Foul Time cards that have popped up into the deck.
Nice. Yeah, I can see how Maskwood Nexus is like gotta be S tier in this strategy. That's really cool. Okay, yeah. So thank you for introducing us to the deck. My next question about it is just what do you like most about playing it?
So I get bored easily of decks. I think that's why I brew constantly. Like gimmick decks are great, but they're really good for Commander Clash in terms of like an outlet, a creative outlet for them. I love brewing gimmick decks, but then once I do like play a gimmick deck like once or twice, my desire to continue playing it goes down very quickly. So my paper decks, I like having a lot of variety, a lot of various win conditions, not just like a linear aim to assemble this specific combo every single time. No shade to people who enjoy that. It's just for me, I like every single game I pick up, I see a different aspect of the deck and a different experience from the deck every single time. And so tribal is kind of like the definitive variety deck for me because outside of the changelings, like everything else can change at any given time. Like yes, you want some changelings, but what tribal support cards you want to run? There's like 500 tribal support cards, and every single set adds like another 5 to it. So you can just mix and match however you want. And I have this giant sideboard of basically just test cards that I want to try out Mirim this week, or I want to try out. There was one Assassin Lord that was also really sweet that came out in Capenna that I think I have in the sideboard as well. And it's just like every single time I play the deck, I can swap out like 4 or 5 cards just to test out different things or have a different experience. So the variety is probably the thing I love the most about it. And also the fact that people always like seem to have a good reaction to it because they see a lot of obscure cards and like, oh, that what's going on? Like, so the fact that people enjoy playing against it also makes me really happy.
Nice. Yeah, I love that a lot. I think that was definitely my reaction the first time I saw this deck. And even just like scrolling through the deck list, everyone's kind of got a favorite creature type, lord type of card. And seeing it pop up in a deck like this is really exciting. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also kind of similar in the brewing type of thing. I'm always just kind of brewing like weird little decks, and I'll probably never build, but I just love working on that. So the thing that I kind of look for to keep a deck around and like actually build it is if new sets come out, we'll have the opportunity to like introduce cool new cards to at least look at trying in the deck. And
yeah, to breathe new life into it.
Exactly, yeah, kind of keep it fresh if I feel like updating it. And just like you said, yeah, every set will have at least a few cards that care about some kind of creature thing, and that you'll want to, take a look at and see if they belong in this deck or if you want to test them out. I like that a lot. That's really cool.
Yeah, every single time a new set comes out, my Twitter feed will have people notifying me like, hey, is this for tribal? Is this for tribal? Like, which is great. Like, I love it. It makes me excited for every single set because I know some of those cards will be in my playtest list at the very least.
Yeah. It's one of those decks, I bet, where you wish you could put 200 cards into it, but
for sure,
unfortunately. Okay, so yeah, we kind of talked a little bit earlier about how this deck is mainly centered around combat, damage, and attacking in order to win the game. Are there any other goals of the deck that you'd like to shout out, or anything else there that we haven't talked about yet?
The deck can do meaner things too. Like I have Reaper King, for example, in the deck that whenever a Scarecrow enters the battlefield, you can destroy target permanent. So if combat is not an option, I can just basically get to a point where I'm putting out so many changelings every single turn that I could wipe people's not only their board states, but you could also wipe out their lands too, if it comes to that. Ooh. So combat usually will get there. Like if people are, I don't know, has like a fog lock or something. Reaper King can basically get through basically any board state eventually. And there is some infinite damage combos and infinite exile combos and infinite toughness reducer combos with Hakan, Stormgald Scourge, and then a bunch of changing spells and a bunch of ways to cast those spells for free. So, for example, Hakan says you can cast night spells from your graveyard, and there's some tribal instants and sorceries that have the changeling type, so they are technically knights, even though they're not knight creatures. So, like Crib Swap says, remove target creature from the game, and their summoner puts a 1/1 shapeshifter token with changeling into play. So, if you have Hakan on the battlefield and you have Crib Swap in the graveyard or in your hand, and you have a way of casting Crib Swap for free, which there's a couple different ways of doing it. Some are with Mirror Rejury, some are with Morphon. Whatever combo you assemble to cast it for free, you can exile your opponent's creatures. You can do the same thing by killing all their creatures with Nameless Inversion, and you can also make all your creatures infinitely large power with Blades of Velos Veil. So if you attack with just one unblocked creature, you can pump its power arbitrarily large to kill them. So if you can get 3 creatures on 3 opponents, they all die. So there's additional ways to just kind of close out games if the game is going long enough, and you can just combo off and win.
That is really cool. I've got to say, I don't think I've heard of any of those combos outside of this deck's context in my life. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's very specific to a changeling deck for sure.
Yeah, it's just so fun to talk about, like Priest of Titania getting untapped by Marrow Rejury, and then there's just so much. It's very cool, very cool. Awesome. Okay, yeah, I'm into it. I think it is. Occasionally, a combat-focused deck will get stopped by some kind of lock or even just a ghostly prison or something like that. So, I'm a fan of having some combos that help you at least get through the damage or get rid of the things you need to.
Because combat is it's an easily countered strategy in Commander, just because there's so many interaction points with it. You can either just destroy the creatures, or you can just prevent the combat from happening. So having ways to get around whatever those common pieces are is important. That's why Reaper King. Well, I've never actually gotten to a point where I've blown up like everybody's lands or something, but I will blow up like a glacial chasm with it or something, preventing me from dealing damage.
I was just about to say, if there is a glacial chasm out, that is a land I think deserves getting blown up by the Scarecrow. So
yeah,
nice. Okay, I love it. And then kind of on the other side of that, what are some of the deck's weaknesses that you've run into while you played it?
So the first weakness that I had with the deck when I first built it was very inconsistent, because I had either too many changelings or too few changelings. I've kind of fixed that over time. I found like a ratio that kind of works for me. So that doesn't happen too often. However, that's just kind of the name of the game. Like, the changelings themselves are really not good. They're not really good creatures by themselves. They really need like tribal lords to be decent. So if you have too many changelings and not enough tribal lords, then you have just a bunch of weak changelings. If you have a lot of tribal lords but you don't have any changelings, and again, you're running into the same issue. So it's inconsistent, but that's kind of by design. And then it is just a combat deck, so anything that beats combat decks will be a weakness to it. Like, if you just wipe the board every single turn, it's going to be very difficult for me to do anything. And then also, since it's a 5-color deck, and I run I think I run maybe one base. No, I didn't even run a single base. Like, I don't even respect non-basic lands. So if you put like a Blood Moon on me or something like that, you got me. You do Ruination. That's fine.
Yeah.
I accept this risk.
That makes sense. So have we kind of like reached the point now where there are enough changelings out there to have that base? Like, you're able to select at least a few and not have to play the worst ones?
Oh, for sure. We've been past that before Cal time, I think. Like,
okay,
I found in my experiences, the changelings that can be cast for 1 mana are the best. So I focus on just like 1 mana changelings or 2 mana changelings that have 1 colorless pip in them that can be reduced to 1 by the Ur-Dragon. And basically anything over 4 mana I don't run anymore. And there's a lot. So
Yeah.
If you wanted like a slower changeling deck, you could definitely swap out some of the slower or the cheaper ones for the more expensive ones that have cooler abilities. But I aim for just keeping them low to the ground. So there's a lot of variety there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes a concern when you're building an obscure creature type based deck, which this one isn't really, considering it has a lot of ways to to get the creatures you need. But yeah, building like oozes, I definitely was playing some oozes that I would have preferred not to. But I think we've just about reached the point where, at least for them, I can be a little more selective. So yeah, that's good that you can do that for this deck too.
Yeah, thankfully Changeling got love, I think, in 3 sets now. It was Lorwyn Block, Modern Horizons, and then finally Kaldheim. And between those 3, there's more enough. Like you could, cool. I think there's like at least like 35-ish changelings or something like that last time I looked. So more than enough to fill a changeling deck. Cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I also like how you understand the kind of like balance and how it can be inconsistent if it doesn't, if you don't kind of draw the cards in the right order. But that is okay with you. That's like by design, and you're totally fine being a little slow in a few games. Yeah, I think that's important, and you don't want to be going like 0 to 60 every single time. At least kind of in your meta, it seems like it's pretty similar to mine in kind of the speed of games. So yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like the inconsistency. Like there's an alternative way of building tribal where you run like General Tazri as your commander, which lets you, when it enters the battlefield, get to search your library for a ally card to put into your hand. And what I've seen from that list is you basically just run one changeling, just mirror entity, which can turn all of your creatures into changelings. So you cast Tazri, and then you get mirror entity, and then you turn all your creatures into changelings, and you usually just kind of win the game off like a sacrifice loop or something like that, which is fine, but then it would run into the issue of being too linear. Like I would always be doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to avoid with my paper deck. So I focus on, I'm actually going to be running like 20 changelings. And if it blows up in my face, if I don't have the right draw, then that's fine. But I like just drawing random changelings. That's part of the fun for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. Kind of like we were talking about earlier, there's a gimmick version of this deck that does a different thing, but is maybe not as varied as this one would be. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so are there any notable cards in this deck, which I bet there are a lot of these, that fill the generic roles of the deck, like card draw or mana ramp or removal, but that are more like spicy and specific to this deck?
Yeah, so I tried to take out all the generic stuff. There's like 1 or 2 cards that I might still cut. Like there's an Arcane Signet that's pretty generic. Curse of Opulence, I guess you could argue, is kind of generic because it's not focused on the theme, but it's focused on attacking, and I just like that card a lot. But for the most part, like all the cards are tribal focused, and they're trying to stay thematic. Like for mana generation, Harabaz Druid taps for 1 mana of any color equal to the number of allies you control, and that's really strong.
Yeah.
Priest of Titania does the same thing, except for elves. Malcolm and Magda make treasures Magda is whenever you tap a dwarf, or a dwarf becomes tap, and Malcolm is whenever you deal combat damage to players. So you're making a bunch of stuff like that. You can turn your changeling into actual just mana dirks with Catilda and like Gemhide Sliver. So for ramp, like it's all just like weird tribal cards that are very strong. Like they're super strong, but they're very like one-offy. And then for like card draw, you mentioned like Tovolar and Yuriko for combat damage. There's also like Unesh Crowd Sphinx Sovereign, which is whenever another Sphinx enters the battlefield, you have a mini Factor Fiction effect. It also makes your Sphinx spells cost 2 less to cast. So that's super fun.
That's cool, yeah.
There's like Tiamat, where you cast it, you get 5 dragon cards into your hand, which is very good. Yeah, I think one of my favorite gimmick cards is probably like Widespread Brutality. It's a 4 mana Rakdos spell that says amass 2. Then the army you amass deals damage equal to its power to each non-army creature.
So
And
cool.
since all the changelings are armies, you pick your highest power one, and then it'll get boosted by 2 counters, and you deal that much damage to each non-army creature, so all your changelings survive, and then you just kill all your opponent's creatures for 4 mana, which is very funny to me. So yeah, there's just like a lot of just weird stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that that question was, I guess, a bit loaded. Usually people only have a few cards for that, but it's basically the whole deck in this case.
Yeah, I would just list out my entire deck, and I'd probably like ignore like Entomb is kind of meh, and like Arcane Signet, Curse of Opulence. Those are the big ones. Actually, my favorite one, Pure Pressure. One more. I don't want to ramble too much, but one more. Pure Pressure, 4 mana sorcery, choose creature type. If you control more creatures of that type than any other player, you can control of all creatures of that type. So
Whoa.
if you have a bunch of changeling on the battlefield and somebody has like a wizard you like, you'll just be like, I want that wizard. Or you could also like turn your opponent's creatures into the type that you want to take. Like there's like 2 dragons on the board, but you want to take a third. You turn that into changeling with like a Meeboy changeling, and then you steal all 3 of them with Pure Pressure. So it does. There's silly things. I don't know.
Peer Pressure. That's a card I've never seen before, and I think that is so hilarious.
Yeah, there's a lot of head scratchers, which work to the deck's advantage, I guess, because people are be like, you show them the cards and you let them read it, but like, still the first time they're going to be playing with this card, so
Yeah.
you get the advantage of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why it would be so fun to play against this deck, because you have no idea what to expect. Like, what... even just... As we've been talking, I've already learned so much. Like, I looked at the deck list, but just talking about it, I've learned so much. And Peer Pressure, what is going on? I love it. The last question should have been, are there any notable generic cards? It would have been a smaller list, but so for the next one, it might also be pretty long. But do you have any pet cards that you just can't resist playing in this deck?
So there's one card that I would say would be on the chopping block if I was trying to optimize the deck, and that's Spellstutter Sprite. I think we might have a connection here that berries are actually my favorite tribe.
Ooh, I love it.
Spellstutter Sprite is like my favorite card in Magic. I used to play it a lot in Pauper when I played Pauper a lot. And it's good in 1 versus 1 because the 1/1 flying body is actually kind of relevant. Not so much in Commander, and there's a lot of times where like I have Spellstutter Sprite in my hand, and the spell that I want to counter is like 5 mana, and I only have like 3 changelings on the battlefield. And it's a bit of a feel bad, but like every single time I get to cast it and get somebody with it, feels really good. And I have the card in foil. It's like one of my favorite Magic arts too. I have like the art print in my office as well. So that one makes me super happy, even if it's not the strongest card.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel similar. I definitely force Faerie Conclave into every deck I can. Bitter Blossom is one of my favorite fairy cards as well. I'll always play a Bitter Blossom if I am in black. And so I'm fully on board with the Spellstutter Sprite. That is, you know, there's some times where just a flash flying chump blocker is not a bad thing to have. So
it's not awful. It's done work, but it's sometimes like if I wanted to optimize it, I would go, but it's never leaving the deck. It's too fun.
Yeah,
too fun. Just like you put in the Faerie Conclave, like maybe another land would be better, but you gotta rep what you like. That's kind of have the fun of Commander.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the reason why I love having a few pet cards in every deck, no matter what's going on. It's just if you draw it and smile or like get some nostalgia, then it's worth it. Like it should be in there. So cool, awesome. I love that. And then kind of on the other side of things, what is the MVP card of the deck? Do you think that just the most synergistic card that will help win the game when you need to?
So it's probably Hakan Stromgald Scourge. You can only play it. It's a knight. You can only play it from your graveyard. And then when it is on the battlefield, you can cast knights cards from your graveyard. So it enables a
Cool.
lot of those infinite combos I mentioned earlier. And it's also just good recursion. Like all your changelings
Yeah.
are knights in general. So if you do get board wiped, you can just get Hakan back on the battlefield and then start redeploying from the graveyard. And there's at least one other knight tribal card in the deck, Knight Exemplar, which makes your other knights get +1/+1 and indestructible. So you could
Ooh.
like redeploy your changelings, and then you could drop a knight on the battlefield. And if the knight dies, you can recast it too. So I think here Hakan is probably like the biggest thing, though. I think a lot of people know that Hakan is the biggest thing in my deck. So anytime I'm like I reveal Hakan and I put him in my graveyard, people were like red alert, time to deal with this. Which I mean is totally warranted. Like you should get rid of Hakan if you can. But yeah, that is like the sneaky way I usually close out games.
I like it. So is Hakan your usual Entomb target for that reason?
Yeah, I'm running into specifically for Hakan. Although
Cool.
these days probably I'll just take out Entomb at some point just because I don't remember the last time I get to actually pull it off. People are very in the know on how serious Hakan is as a threat. So maybe I don't rush it as much.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Especially in your usual Commander Clash group, I bet they can see that coming from a mile away these days.
Oh yeah, yeah. My regular play groups, like paper play groups, they all know. They all know Hakan's a problem child, and he is.
I love it. Yeah, Hakan, I bet, also kind of goes off. I mean, a lot of things in this deck go off with Maskwood Nexus, but Hakan specifically, like, now your graveyard is literally your second hand.
Yeah, just any changeling, any creature, anything is just being recast over and over again. So, yeah.
Amazing. I love that. Cool. Okay, so my next question, which you've played this deck for a really long time. I know you've played tons of games with this deck. What is one of your like memorable or favorite in-game moments you've had while playing it?
I've had a lot of really, really good games with this deck, but one that popped to mind that was just so silly was I did a Commander Quickie, which is like an abridged gameplay video, and I had Rebel and Ben Mix Proxies and Casual Jake on for that game. And I remember there was a point where both Rebel and Ben were trying to deal with my board state, so they were teaming up using sorceries and then a very convoluted stack of instants to deal with my creatures. Like they tried to wipe the board, but they also had to deal with Knight Exemplar, or else all my creatures would survive. So they had like an answer for the Knight Exemplar to destroy it at instant speed. And I had like a Shapesharer, though I turned into another copy of the Knight Exemplar. And they're like, okay, so we're gonna try and kill the new Shapesharer to the new Knight Exemplar. And I needed more mana, so I turned one of my mana dorks, I think it was Harabaz Druid, into Changeling with my B-Boy Changeling, and I untapped it with the Griffin Canyon so I could tap it again for even more mana and do more things. And Shapesharer allows you to turn any of your Changeling into any other Changeling. So I turned another Changeling into another copy of Knight Exemplar. So all of them will live, and it was just like a mess. It was just like and we were just like laughing the entire time. We were like, how is this? What is going on? What are these cards? What is any of this nonsense? And it was just very funny. I still lost the game, but it was just hilarious turn of events. Like everybody's just piling on the instants and the instant speed answers and stuff.
That's such a good story. I always get excited when the stack gets a couple instants and a few effects deep, and I can imagine, especially with how strange a lot of these cards are that you just mentioned, the weirdest stack you've ever seen, and then like what's going on here? That's really fun.
Just utterly bizarre. It didn't like win the game or anything, but it was just very funny. And yeah, it was just like a cool moment. It was like a jigsaw puzzle to solve, I was like, oh, I can do this, and then I do this, and I get this mediocre benefit here, and it's all coming together.
The changelings, they're all coming together. I love it. Yeah.
Yep.
That is really fun. Okay, this has gone by so fast for my brain. It doesn't make sense, but we've reached the last question, which is, what advice would you give to other people who are looking to build a similar deck to this, if they're interested in it from this episode, or just want to know kind of how to get started? What would your advice be to them?
I wrote a primer so shameless plug. I wrote a primer detailing exhaustively like all the different tribal support cards I could find. I updated it for Kaldheim, so it's like a year old now.
Cool.
But it still has a lot of options. Like there's so many tribal cards out there, and it was half the difficulty was just researching the darn thing, because it's really difficult to like scryfall search tribal cards like centaurs you control get stuff. Like how do you find that unless you're typing up centaur? So it was a long process, but hopefully that will help people build their own decks. And then I would say that because you're dealing with all tribes, obviously the card pool that you're working with is hundreds, thousands of cards to sift through, and that's very overwhelming, and that's going to be really difficult to make a deck. So the way to narrow the deck is focus on a archetype that you like. Like I focused on combat, but I've seen sacrifice versions of the deck. I've seen tap untap tribal. I had a version of that before actually. I've seen life gain version of the deck. So just pick an archetype that you want to focus on and narrow down your search based on that. So you just look for tribal lords that care about tapping and untapping, or if you're doing that, or sacrifice if you're doing that, or combat if you're doing like this version of the deck does. And that will let you narrow a search and find, the right amount of cards. Instead of being like a 300 card pile, you'll actually have like 110, and you'll just cut from there.
Nice. Yeah, so I'll link to your primer article in the episode description. If I remember correctly, you had compiled like quite a few lists in there of kind of cards people would want to look for if they go these different directions. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
Cool.
I had like a section for ramp, and these are all like the tribal support cards that deal with mana advantage. And then I had like card advantage. These are all the tribal support cards that deal with card advantage, recursion, protection, removal, basically every single aspect of a deck that you want to cover. I try to sort them by that. And even then, like I probably missed a couple tribal cards here and there, and then also just like between Kaldheim and now, there's been like a billion new sets. So
yeah,
I'm sure it still needs an update, but it's a good start. It's a good start to help you out. Like if you're looking for more ramp cards and you want to be on theme, then that'll be there.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the way you write your articles to have, it's not just like one deck list at the end. It has suggestions for other things that that you consider that maybe you'd like other people to consider as well. And especially for a deck that is honestly like this complicated, it's pretty complicated. It helps a lot to have an article to at least get started on.
Yeah, I like giving people like, here's a deck list, because like not everybody has the time to brew their own decks. Like, so I want to give people like, here's a sample deck list. It's good to go. It has my seal of approval. But then I like, if you want to tweak and tune, or maybe you don't have the cards in the sample deck list or whatever, or maybe you just want to take it a different direction, I always like providing just here's how I got to the sample deck list. Here's all the options that might interest you. So you can build it yourself. You can tweak and tune, or you could just pick up a sample deck list and go.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely check it out. Also, it's just a good read if you're interested in this deck already. So yeah, check it out. And speaking of shameless plugs, thank you so much for being here. Please give us a send-off with maybe, where we can find you and what your upcoming content looks like.
Sure. You can find all my content at mtggoldfish.com, and you can find all my videos at MTG Goldfish Commander on YouTube. And that's basically it. There's a new set that's being previewed right now.
Yep.
The Dominator United. So that's taking up all my brain energy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I'm focusing on right now. But Commander Clash, Commander Podcast, it keeps going, regardless of what else is being released at a given time.
Cool. Yeah, it's always a constant series that I'm happy to see and excited when an episode releases. So thank you so much for joining me today and talking to me about your Commander deck. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm honored to have had somebody who I've been watching your Commander content for so long. I'm honored to have you on mine for once.
Thanks, my pleasure. It was great. It was great talking to you about my favorite deck. So
yes,
that's always fun for me. Yeah.
I love it. Yep, that's why I do it. It's just so much fun. Cool. Okay. Yeah, and I'll also have some links to my other things down below in the episode description, so check those out. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it for today. So I'll wrap things up. Thank you everybody for listening to this episode, and I really appreciate it. And I hope I will hear from you soon. And have a fantastic day.